Rodney is with us 2 days removed from Alabama's first spring scrimmage. Rodney, you've had an opportunity to digest it, talk with your sources, put together analysis. What are some of your takeaways from scrimmage number 1 this past Saturday on a cold, damp Bryant-Denny Stadium field turf from Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, not a whole lot out there, to be honest with you, Gary. I mean, it sounds like a pretty solid scrimmage from what we picked up. They're doing a lot of experimenting on the offensive line. I think we saw that last week. Mac Jones did pretty well as the reserve quarterback. Jalen Hurts had a couple of nice throws. I think the real buzz was just how well Tua Tagovailoa played, given the fact that he's 2 weeks removed from a surgery on his left hand. That how he gripped the ball and made some very accurate throws. So I think those were all very positive things. Obviously, the wide receiver core was without Jerry Jeudy, but sounds like Terrell Shavers had a couple of nice plays, grabs. Henry Ruggs had a long touchdown reception from Jalen Hurts, I think. And, on the defensive side, again, Raekwon Davis, Isaiah Buggs, just kind of continuing, to make the progress that they've shown all season. And in the spring, they were pretty dominant players. And Quentin Williams, Gary's really a guy that's emerging on the defensive line. I think we'll see a lot of Quentin Williams this year.
Right.
Sounds like he's having a great spring. And, but overall, I thought that from what I've heard, the secondary played pretty well. Davion Smith was a guy that was a real standout there at the corner position. Trevon Diggs did not play. He has, I think, a slight ankle injury, but should be fine. But the kicking might have been one of the highlights from Joseph Bulovas, who was 4 or 5 on his field goal attempts, and I think he hit 2 from 45. So, that's good news, especially given those conditions. Not really sure about Skylar DeLong's punting and who else punted, but I know he hit a couple of really nice ones, but I think that the operation time of it was something that was a real concern.
I mentioned this earlier, too, in talking with Scott Moore. Offensive line-wise, of course, Womack, the starting right tackle from a year ago, is out this spring. But the first unit consisted of Jonah Williams at left tackle, Lester Cotton at left guard, Pierce Baker at center, then Jedrick Wills, who is a dynamic offensive lineman. I really like this right side. I'm not going to lie to you for potential. With Wills at right guard and Leatherwood at right tackle. That's a pretty imposing physical unit right there, in my opinion.
Yeah, that group's been working now about a week or so, or maybe even longer. Obviously, we didn't see it until this past week in media viewing. But they could have been working like that throughout the spring. But it certainly sounds like a good group. Certainly, all those guys, very highly regarded players. We'll see what happens. I mean, I know there's still a lot of competition. Matt Womack, as you mentioned, he'll be back. I still think Josh Cashier's got a chance to really compete there at the left guard spot. So we'll see. Again, like we said early, there's going to be a lot of shuffling, a lot of experimentation to make sure that they can kind of put the best 5 out there. Not only that, Nick Saban made a great point, I thought, the other day when he said, sometimes you have to do these things because if there's an injury at some point in the season, you have to be prepared to know who you can put where and what your expectations of those guys could be. So, again, some of this experimentation is just for the benefit of, maybe if there's an injury down the road.
There are a lot of injuries this spring. The bicycles were getting a workout on Saturday. A lot of black jerseys, Miller Forrestall, Jerry Jeudy, Kendall Randolph, Josh Jacobs, Trayvon Diggs, Matt Womack, Keaton Anderson. Of course, Anthony Jennings we knew was out going in. So a lot of guys are missing time. Of course, the most important thing is getting them back and getting them ready for fall camp. At the same time, with all those injuries, it's been an opportunity for other guys to get some additional reps, and there's a lot of young players on this Alabama team at all the positions that are talented and can use some extra priority, and they're getting a lot of extra work this spring.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what spring's about, is to try to get as many guys reps as possible. Development. That's what we've talked about. The key to spring is development, and I think that's obviously been the focus. A lot of guys getting opportunities. You get started tight end. a lot of young tight ends. You mentioned Miller Forstall. He's actually participating somewhat, in some of the practices. But you got a lot of young guys. You got Major Tennyson, who was a freshman last year, played some. Kendrick James is very promising. Guy that was a freshman last year, now is going to be a sophomore. So you've got a lot of guys at that spot. You've got a lot of young offensive linemen. And then some that have been around a while that haven't played as much. Richie Pettibone, for example. Chris Owens is another guy that's an interior player. Scott Lashley on the outside as an offensive tackle, with Matt Womack being out. He's played in there quite a bit with, when Jedrick Wills was over there, and also now that with Leatherwood there, Lashley's got some reps. So, on the defensive side, you're certainly trying to develop some of your defensive linemen, some of the younger guys. One that quickly comes to mind is Fedarian Mathis, who will be a freshman, a redshirt freshman this year. You've got Stephon Wynn, who will be a true freshman. He's getting reps. LeBrian Ray, who showed some flashes last year as a true freshman before he broke that foot. He's getting a lot of opportunities as well. So all of those guys on the line, both sides of the ball, getting some very, very valuable reps, because those are areas, Gary, where you have to be able to build some depth.
In the secondary, there's a lot of focus there because of all the players that are departing, and of course Diggs not able to go is a setback. But let's talk about some of these guys that are back there. Shyheim Carter, Savion Smith, Maiden, Thompson, McKinney, Wright. It goes on and on. Who are some of the young secondary players that you think have made a move this spring?
Well, first of all, Savion Smith at that right corner spot is really showing some flashes. He's a former 5-star recruit that went to LSU and then transferred to a JUCO and now here at Alabama. So he's doing a really nice job. I think, Gary, the experience factor is always important, but I think, in terms of just his development, I think it's going really well. Trevon Diggs has done a nice job also at left corner. I think that's been very promising, too, the potential that both those guys have. And the thing about them, they're both good-sized corners. I mean, you're talking about both 6'1" plus and, right at 200 pounds. So good-sized corners. Shyheim Carter's been around a while. Coach Saban actually mentioned him, was asked about him on Saturday after the scrimmage, and had some positive things to say about his development. So, Shy Carter's a very versatile player. He's been working star positions. He can play corner, probably even play safety if you needed him to. Jared Maiden had a good offseason. He's competing there at the star position. He's doing a nice job. Kareem McDonald's another young player that's very versatile, could play star, could play safety. Deontay Thompson, I think he's going to be he started those last two games, and he showed some real flashes. I think Deontay's going to have a big year at safety. You mentioned Xavier McKinney. He's a big physical kid. I really like the way he looks. Again, he played some last year as a true freshman. I think he's got a chance to nail down a spot back there, Gary, as a safety. And then Daniel Wright's also in the mix. And there's probably a few others that I didn't mention, but a lot of the guys coming in the fall, or actually they'll go through August camp, but they'll be here in late May, early June to start working out. But a lot of those guys, I think, are going to have opportunities, whether it's Patrick Surtain, Joshua Jobe. Those are two outstanding cornerback-type prospects that could, have versatility to play other positions as well there in the secondary. Eddie Smith, Jalen Armour-Davis. So they've got a great group coming in that could certainly lend some depth and maybe even push for a spot back there.
Obviously, building a quality football team, a lot of it has to do with chemistry, and that's the coach's job to get these players on the same page. It's what they're paid to do. In this case, though, this year with 6 new coaches, a lot of talk about the coaches having developed chemistry. And I know, again, we're not allowed to be in there for the actual meat and potatoes of the scrimmage other than a viewing period. But are you hearing anything about the way this coaching staff is coming together and how they're working together?
Well, I think as far as working together, you can watch it and listen a little bit, and you can tell that they've got a lot of really good young coaches, enthusiastic. I think they're all on the same page. I don't think there's any question about that. So I think from that standpoint, chemistry is really, really good. And again, I just think it's just being around each other. It just takes time. And I think that's a good part of this spring practice, because that's another thing that, the coaching staff can develop that on-the-field chemistry together, and I think this is a great opportunity for that. But as far as, Gary, how they're all meshing together, I've heard very, very positive things about that. So I think that's really encouraging.
Having a first-time play caller on defense in Tosh Lapoy, Nick Saban's always very involved with both sides of the ball. We know that. And clearly, defense is his expertise, and he's always got a hand in that. I like to say that it's Nick Saban's defense, and the coordinator is just tasked with carrying it out. But with the fact that Tosh has never coordinated a defense as far as the play calling aspect of it and setting the defenses, do you expect Nick Saban to be even more involved than usual this season?
Again, that's just my speculation, and I really don't know, but I think certainly he's always fairly involved in it, and I would think that this year it would be no different. I would think that, the fact that Tosh Lapoy's never called a defense in a game, I think certainly, Nick Saban probably will have more of a hand in it, if you will, or maybe even more attention to it. I don't know how you would phrase that, but I think certainly, Gary, you'd have to think that because, these are all, there's only one defensive coach that's returning, and that is Tosh Lapoy. Other than that, you've got new coaches. You got new defensive line coach, Greg Gulagowski. You've got Pete Golding at inside backers. You've got Carl Scott in the secondary. So these are guys that really haven't been together in this system. So I think this, like we said, the spring, the off season that they just had, the meshing that they've had during that time, and then as we move forward into summer, all of these things are very important, I think, for this defensive coaching staff. And I think that's a good point. I do think you're right that, Nick Saban will be, I would be surprised if he's not, even though he's probably always is, but I think he'll probably even be more so because, listen, you don't have Kirby Smart, who was with you for 10 years, and you don't have Jeremy Pruitt, who knew your system backwards and forwards. This is a transition of sorts. So, I think it's very important that they have that guidance from Nick Saban.
Tighter Insiders Rodney Orr with us here on the Bud Light Hotline talking Bama football. We'll ask him a recruiting question here in just a moment. You mentioned Bulovas having a really good day, 4 or 5, and I think Saban said they were all outside of 35 yards, so there were no short ones there. How important? And Alabama's won a lot of championships with place kicking that has not been maybe where fans would like it to be. But how important is it to get this kicking game solidified, whether it's Bulovas or the transfer from Temple, particularly with the fact that I think it's a constant reminder, and I think another reason that Alabama's place kicking is under the microscope, and knowing that both the Carlsons would have come here in a heartbeat. Daniel just completed one of the most successful place kicking careers in the history of college football. Now his younger brother, Anders, steps in and hits a 62-yarder on Saturday in Auburn spring game. It would have been good from 70. And I think Alabama fans are always reminded of that. Again, Bama's managing to win games, a lot of them, without great place kicking, it seems. But it would be nice if this year, I think fans felt like when a kicker ran out there, it was more of, oh, here we go, rather than, oh, my goodness, right? Yeah, I think there's probably been obviously lack of confidence. There's no doubt about that. Although those guys that you mentioned, not by name, but over the recent years, a lot of those guys have made some really good kicks, big kicks at times, but the consistency's just not been there. I mean, you didn't know, are you going to miss a 35-yarder, which should be money in the bank. So you want a guy that you can trust 40 plus in, that it's money in the bank. I mean, it's perfection. From 40 in, if you can get that, you really can't ask for a whole lot more than that. Everything else I think is bonus. But certainly if Joseph Bulovas could be that guy, that would be great. Sounds like he had a tremendous day in those weather conditions the other day. You mentioned Austin Jones. He was 50 of 67 in his career at Temple. Now grad transfer will be here this summer at Alabama. So hopefully between one of those two guys, you can get that money in the bank from 40 and in, Gary. And then, they have the leg strength to hit those 45, 50-plus yarders. Obviously not maybe with the accuracy of the shorter ones, but if you can just get that consistency, that would be so huge. You look at Alabama offensively, how I think they're going to be able to put up points, and defensively, and then round it off with a kicker.
And then, hey, let's not forget, punting, wow. I mean, you just lost the best punter in school history. I mean, J.K. Scott was a phenom. He was unbelievable. And this guy was just so good. And it's going to be interesting to see if it's Skylar DeLong, how, he steps into those shoes. And because I think this is going to be really, really important. And I think you may see some changes in their punting, too. I think you may see some formational changes that might be helpful to them in terms of, maybe what Coach Saban talked about, the operation speed of it, Gary. I think you may see some formational changes to kind of be helpful in that area. And that's where a guy like Jeff Banks comes in. He's coaching the special teams. He's got a ton of expertise in that area. So I'm sure that whatever he does, he'll get that operation time. He'll improve that, certainly.
Rodney, a little recruiting chatter here. It was a very productive week last week for Alabama. We have heard that Nick Saban really has, even more so than usual, committed to this recruiting class, to getting it back to the level that he thinks it should be at. Rashad Chaney, the former Georgia commitment, the defensive tackle, commits to Alabama out of the Atlanta area. And, of course, Paul Tyson, the outstanding quarterback from Hewitt-Trussville, great-grandson of Coach Bryant, commits. That's 6 commitments for 2019, all rated 4 stars or better, off to a really fast start on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, and again, we go back to there's a lot of more players, I think, in the state of Alabama. There's more players in the area than what there were last year, and Alabama is off to a faster start than what they were last year. There's no question. They're in on a ton of players all over the country. I think it's a better class all over the country. And Alabama's in on a lot of guys. There's no question about that, and they have gotten off to, you mentioned, those commitments are really strong. Gary, I think that the one thing we have to keep in mind is it's April the 9th. It's not November the 9th. Some of these guys that are saying stuff now, they're saying it in November. That's going to be positive, which I know Alabama's going to recruit extremely well. But I'll give you an example. The number 1 player in the country was in this weekend from Thousand Oaks, California, Jack linebacker Kayvon Thibodeau. And, USC and LSU have been considered the possible favorites right now. And, again, it's very early. He had a great visit. No question. He's going to come back for another visit. If this guy's still talking strong in October, November, then I think that's going to be a real positive sign that Alabama has a great shot at him. And again, it's early on a guy like that because all these guys that Alabama's in on are going to be extremely highly recruited. But back to what I was saying earlier, I think with the strength of some of these players in the state and over in Mississippi, I think Alabama will do really, really well in those 2 areas. So it's going to be another very, very strong recruiting class. I think they'll challenge for the number 1 spot again.
I do too. And with Tyson in the fold, there's no doubt that Alabama is going to take 2 quarterbacks in this class. I think there's a very good possibility that they'll take 2 in-state guys. I think Talia Tagovailoa being the other key target there. Am I on track there? You think that Alabama's the leader for Tagovailoa? Or I know there's a lot of competition for him, but clearly, just like with Tyson, there's strong family ties to the Alabama program here with Tua, his brother, already on the team.
Yeah, I think, certainly don't discount all that competition. I think Alabama's going to be hard to beat, though. I really do. I think they're in good shape with Talia. And I think he's a great player. Everybody I've talked to, Gary, I'm talking about from high school coaches on, that have watched a lot of the better quarterbacks come around. They rave about him, and they think he's got Tua-type potential, no question. So that'd be really exciting to get a young player like that. And I thought, Paul Tyson, I watched his tape. I think he's and I don't say this because they're all developmental guys. That's no question coming out of high school. But if you look at quarterback, like an offensive lineman, it's really a developmental position. And I look at Paul Tyson, I see a lot of tools. I mean, I think he's obviously got a lot of developing to do, but he does have a lot of tools. And I think over time, he's got a chance to be an excellent quarterback. But again, I think he's more, as I look at him, I would say more in the developmental category right now.